The photograph was taken 3 hours before I found the cabin. I know because I checked the timestamp. The picture showed me standing on an old Forest Service road, looking down at a set of tire tracks in the mud. I was wearing my ranger uniform. My radio was clipped to my shoulder. My back was turned toward the camera. Someone had been standing less than 50 feet away, hidden between the trees, watching me. The worst part wasn't that someone had been following me. The worst part was that the photograph was already hanging on the wall inside the cabin I hadn't discovered yet. I spent almost 12 years working as a park ranger in the Appalachian Mountains. Most people imagine the job is about wildlife, helping lost hikers, and maintaining trails. And sometimes it is. But the mountains also have a way of hiding things. Old roads disappear under vegetation. Cabins get abandoned. People wander into areas where they shouldn't be. Every ranger I know has at least one story they don't like telling. This was mine. It happened in late October, during one of the quietest parts of the year. The summer tourists were gone. The hiking trails were nearly empty. The forest had that deep silence you only experience when there are miles of trees between you and the nearest person. My assignment that morning was simple. Check an old service road near the northern section of the park. A few hikers had reported hearing vehicle engines late at night. That area was closed to public vehicles. Illegal hunters were my first guess. I parked my truck at the end of the maintained road and continued on foot. The weather was cold but clear. The ground was covered with wet leaves, making every step louder than normal. About a mile into the trail, I noticed something unusual. Fresh tire tracks. They weren't from a park vehicle. They were too narrow. I crouched down and examined them. The tires were worn but not damaged. Whoever drove through here recently knew the road. They weren't lost. They were coming here intentionally. I followed the tracks for another half mile until they disappeared near a small clearing. That's when I noticed the smoke, a thin line rising above the trees. Someone had a fire going. I immediately contacted dispatch. Unit 12, I may have located an unauthorized campsite or structure. The response came quickly. Copy. Do you need assistance? Not yet. I'm going to investigate. Looking back, that's the decision I regret most, not because I entered the woods, because I assumed I was dealing with a normal person. The cabin appeared about 10 minutes later. At first, I thought it was an old hunting shelter. The roof was covered with moss. The wood had turned dark from years of rain, but as I got closer, I realized something was wrong. The cabin wasn't abandoned. Smoke came from the chimney. Fresh footprints crossed the porch, and sitting beside the door was a pair of muddy boots. Someone was inside. I called out, "Park ranger, anyone inside?" No answer. I waited. Nothing. I called again. Still nothing. Normally I would leave and return with backup, but something caught my attention. The door wasn't locked. It was slightly open, like someone had walked out moments earlier and expected to come back. Inside, the cabin looked strangely organized. A small table, a wood stove, a bed, food supplies stacked neatly against the wall. No personal items, no family pictures, nothing that showed who lived there. Then I noticed the hallway. The walls were covered with photographs, hundreds of them. At first, I thought they were old vacation pictures. Then I looked closer. Every photo showed a person, but none of them were looking at the camera. A woman sitting beside a waterfall, a man walking along a trail, a family eating at a campsite, a teenager standing near an overlook, all taken from a distance, all taken without their knowledge. I moved closer. That's when I noticed the names. Some pictures had handwritten notes underneath, dates, locations, small details. Blue Ridge Trail, October 14th, camped alone. My stomach tightened. These weren't random photographs. They were records. Someone had been following people, studying them, keeping track of them. Then I saw a face I recognized, a young woman named Sarah Mitchell. She had disappeared 2 years earlier while hiking alone. Her missing person poster had been everywhere. Ranger stations, trail entrances, visitor centers. Search teams looked for her for almost 2 weeks. They never found her. But there she was, pinned to the cabin wall, alive, smiling, walking along a trail less than a mile from where I was standing. I looked at the next photograph, another missing person, then another. The cabin wasn't full of memories. It was full of people who vanished. I reached for my radio. "Dispatch Unit 12. Static." I tried again. Nothing. I stepped outside. Still nothing. The mountains blocked signals all the time, but something about it bothered me. The timing felt wrong. I pulled out my phone. No service. I checked my emergency locator. No connection. For the first time that day, I felt completely alone. Then I heard something. A floorboard upstairs. I froze. The cabin only had one bedroom loft above the main room. I had checked the downstairs. Nobody was there. I slowly looked toward the ceiling. Another step. Slow. Careful. Someone was moving above me. I lowered my voice. "Park Ranger, identify yourself." Silence. I reached for my flashlight and started walking toward the stairs. That's when I saw the photograph. It was lying on the table. I hadn't noticed it before. Maybe because my attention was on the walls. Maybe because someone wanted me to notice it later. I picked it up. My hands went cold. It was a picture of me, taken earlier that morning, standing on the service road, looking at the tire tracks. The person who took it was close enough that I should have heard them, but I didn't. I slowly turned toward the stairs. The footsteps had stopped. Whoever was upstairs knew I had found the photograph. I climbed one step, then another. The old wood creaked under my weight. Halfway up, I noticed something carved into the wall. A message. Not old, fresh. 3 words. "You finally came." I reached the top. The room was empty. No person, no hiding place. Just a small mattress, a notebook, and a camera sitting on the floor. I opened the notebook. Every page contained dates, locations, names, and descriptions. Not just missing people. Rangers, hunters, hikers, anyone who came close to finding the cabin. The final page was different. It only contained one sentence, written in fresh ink. "He always looks behind him." I heard movement downstairs. I turned around. Nobody. But the camera on the floor suddenly clicked. A photograph printed from the side. I picked it up. It was a picture of me standing in the loft, taken seconds earlier. I left that cabin faster than I have ever left anywhere in my life. I didn't search for whoever was there. I didn't try to be a hero. I ran. When I reached the trail, I contacted backup using my emergency beacon. A search team arrived 2 hours later. They found the cabin. They found the photographs. They found the notebook. But they never found the person who owned it. The strangest part? 3 days later, investigators told me something I still think about. Every photograph inside the cabin was developed years earlier. Every photograph except one. Mine. The cabin was removed from the area. The official report listed it as an illegal hunting structure connected to a missing person investigation. But they never released the photographs. They never explained how someone could take a picture of me without me knowing. And they never answered one question. If that person had been watching me for years, why did they finally want me to find the cabin? Because sometimes I wonder if the cabin wasn't a hiding place. Maybe it was an invitation. And maybe the person who built it knew exactly which ranger would eventually open that door. The first time I realized something was following me, I was already 6 miles away from the nearest road. I remember stopping in the middle of the trail because I heard footsteps behind me. Not animal footsteps, not branches moving from the wind. Footsteps, slow, heavy, careful. I turned around expecting to see another ranger, maybe a hunter who had wandered too far into the forest. But there was nothing, just the endless wall of pine trees stretching in every direction. That was the moment I should have turned back. But I didn't. I had worked as a park ranger in the Appalachian Mountains for almost 9 years by then. I knew those forests better than most people knew their own neighborhoods. I knew the sounds. I knew the animals. I knew when something was normal. And that sound behind me was not normal. My name is Daniel, and this happened during my last year working patrol in a remote section of the Appalachian wilderness. My assignment was mostly routine, checking old trails, inspecting abandoned cabins, helping lost hikers, and making sure nobody was camping in restricted areas. Most days were quiet, sometimes too quiet. The area I covered had dozens of miles of Forest Service roads and forgotten trails. There were old hunting camps, abandoned structures, and places where people rarely went because cell service disappeared completely. That was exactly why I liked working there. There was something peaceful about being completely alone, until that week. The first strange thing happened during a routine patrol near an old fire lookout tower. The tower had not been used regularly for years. It was still maintained, but most rangers only checked it a few times each season. I was hiking toward it around late afternoon when I noticed something strange. A set of footprints. They were fresh. They weren't mine. They weren't from boots either. At first, I thought another ranger had been there. But when I looked closer, something bothered me. The prints were unusually long, almost too long. The spacing between each step was strange too. It looked like whoever made them was walking slowly, but covering a lot of distance. I followed them for about 50 yards before stopping. That's when I noticed something else. The tracks suddenly stopped, right in the middle of the trail. No turning, no walking into the trees, nothing. Just an empty trail. I remember standing there trying to convince myself there was a simple explanation. Maybe the ground was uneven. Maybe I had lost the trail. But deep down, I knew that wasn't what happened. That was when things started feeling wrong. A few days later, I was doing a night patrol near an isolated cabin area. The cabins were old ranger shelters that hikers sometimes use during emergencies. Most of them were empty. Around midnight, I saw a light moving between the trees. A flashlight. Someone was walking through the forest. I immediately called out. "Ranger Service, identify yourself." The light stopped. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then a voice answered. "Can you help me?" The voice sounded like a man, but something about it felt strange. It was flat, almost like someone repeating words they had heard before. I moved toward the sound. "Are you injured?" No answer. Then the voice came again. "Can you help me?" The exact same tone, the exact same pause, the exact same words. I stopped walking. I had dealt with lost hikers before. People panic. People repeat themselves. But this wasn't panic. It sounded like someone trying to imitate a person asking for help. I reached for my radio. That's when the flashlight turned off. The forest went completely dark. I called out again. Nothing. I waited almost a minute. Then I heard footsteps. Not coming toward me. Walking away. Fast. I followed the sound for a short distance, but stopped when I reached the edge of the trail, because standing between the trees was a person. At least I thought it was a person. It was too dark to see details clearly, but I could tell something was wrong. The figure was too tall, much taller than any normal person should have been. It was standing completely still, not hiding, not moving, just watching me. I raised my flashlight. The beam hit its face, and I still remember what bothered me most. It wasn't that it looked strange. It was that it looked like it was trying very hard not to. The face looked almost normal. Almost. The smile was wrong. It was stretched too wide, like it had learned what a smile was supposed to look like, but didn't understand why humans did it. I stepped backward, The figure tilted its head, slowly, like it was studying me. Then it spoke, using my own voice. "Can you help me?" I froze. I had never experienced fear like that before. Not the kind where you see something dangerous. The kind where your brain refuses to understand what your eyes are seeing. I immediately turned and walked back toward the cabin. I didn't run. I knew better. Running in the woods at night is how people get injured. But every instinct in my body was telling me to move faster. That's when things got worse. As I walked back, I heard footsteps behind me, matching mine. Every step I took, another step followed. I stopped. The footsteps stopped. I moved. They moved. I reached the cabin, locked the door, and stayed inside until sunrise. I didn't sleep. I just sat there listening. Around 3 o'clock in the morning, something walked around the cabin. Slowly. The floorboards outside creaked. Once, twice. Then silence. The next morning, I checked outside. There were footprints around the entire cabin. But the strangest part was where they ended, right beside the window. Someone had been standing there looking inside. After that night, I reported everything. My supervisor listened carefully, but never laughed at me. He only asked one question. "Did it speak?" I remember feeling confused. I asked him what he meant. He looked away for a moment. Then he told me something I still think about. A few years earlier, another ranger had reported hearing voices in the same area. Voices that sounded familiar. Voices that called people by name. Nothing was ever found. No person. No explanation. Just reports from different people describing the same feeling. Something was there. Something watching. I transferred out of that district less than a month later. I never went back to that part of the forest. People ask me if I believe it was an animal, a person, or something else. The truth is, I don't know, and I don't think I want to know, because the part that bothers me most isn't what I saw. It's what happened afterward. A year after leaving that job, I received a voicemail from an unknown number. There was no message, just a few seconds of silence. Then a voice, my voice, whispering, "Can you help me?